Thanks, Sarah. Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us tonight. Apologies for the breaks in transmission. All good, though. We are where we need to be. We're all 5 by 5, but as my American friends say, it's all copacetic. So we're all in good shape. Now, tonight, an extremely timely and extremely important session with our favourite former communist, now man of God, Commo John. As you know, well, some of you new listeners might not be aware, former head of Trades Hall in Canberra, senior unionist, 3-4 generations of union in his blood. He's the last made man, the last of the Mohicans is what they call him, because he's the guy who knows where the bodies are buried. But straight as an arrow, never faced any challenges from anything that he ever did in his time in the union movement. The man fought for the workers, and that was it. And now he's seen the other side, and he's fighting back. So, as we know, there's been some developments down in Victoria, the CFMEU, and its head, John Setka. I'm not going to dive into it. This is John's bailiwick. Yeah, John Wilson special. He'll cover everything he needs to cover the way that only John can cover it. Then we'll have some questions on the issues that John raises. And then after that, if we have time, we'll have some general questions if we need to. So, John, welcome. Thanks for joining us, mate. I know you're busy. You've been flat out like a lizard drinking. We are your last stop for the night. So, please, let's go. And let's do a deep dive, a very deep dive into the union movement, the CFMEU specifically. John Setka.
Thank you, Rick. You're frozen, so I'm just going to keep talking, mate. So if you're still frozen, brother, you just sit back, put your feet up, and I'll give you a pretty succinct report, if I may. And thank you to all of your viewers out there. Okay, let's start this. Most people out there would have heard through the corporate media, the Lane Street media, recent reports that a very important key industrial figure in the state of Victoria, for the Americans out there, Victoria is the second largest economy here in Australia, and Melbourne is the second largest capital city here in Australia, a very, very important economic and industrial state to our nation. But there's been reports that a key player, being the State Secretary, the Victorian State Secretary of the CFMEU, the Construction, Forestry, Mining and Energy Union, it may now be called the Construction, Forestry and Maritime Energy Union, and their chief, John Setka, has resigned. Under pressure, he has resigned. Okay. Now, this has got some very, very interesting, very interesting details that go into all of this. Okay, so let's start talking about some of them. The allegations against Setka are very, very, very serious. When you talk about corruption, i.e. some money changing hands, that's one thing. That's one thing. It's bad, but it's one thing. Okay, but we're not talking about that. We are talking organised crime. Okay, organised crime being embedded inside of the union, and organised crime and very serious violent criminals being given a gateway into some of the biggest projects, the biggest construction projects here in Australia. Now that, along with all of the corrupt payments, and all of the other multiple millions of on-costs that are going into the construction industry to keep this corrupt situation in place, is bleeding this country dry and causing enormous problems. So this is a huge issue for all of us, I want to talk a little bit about CFMEU New South Wales and their leadership. A guy up there, the state secretary up there, convicted of, drugs, selling drugs out of union cars and endorsing drug distribution throughout the New South Wales construction industry, as well as payments and illegal payments, corrupt payments, and so on. Okay. I want to also go into another corrupt union of recent years called the Health Services Union of Australia, the HSUA, particularly in New South Wales and Queensland. But I also want to talk about some of these rotten police unions, right? I want to talk about some of them. The Queensland Police Union, New South Wales Victorian Police Unions, and how rotten and corrupt these trade unions are also, and how they need also to be cleaned up and cleaned out. Okay. Now, if you want to know how, and I'll go into this, why this corruption has got this bad, and it is been allowed to take root so deep, so that tens and literally hundreds of millions of dollars are being creamed off and put into the pockets of gangsters and corrupt union officials, right? You've only got to look at law enforcement here in Australia, and let's talk about law enforcement here or down in Victoria. The law enforcement have allowed this to go on. The law enforcement, the police, have allowed this to go on. And why? It's because they themselves are rotten to the core, as corrupt as they come. They have allowed this corruption inside the construction sector and inside the CFMEU and others to flourish, because they themselves are rotten to the core, rotten to the core. And I'll also go on to the Commonwealth Department of Public Prosecutions and their state equivalents. They themselves are rotten to the core, rotten to the core, and as corrupt as they come. The Australian Federal Police have embedded inside of the AFP. And remember, the Australian Federal Police Association I held in high regard. They were an affiliate union of my peak council when I was the president, and they were a very honourable organisation. But not now. Not now. When you look at the Australian Federal Police, you'll note, and this was published on their webpage. I'm not sure if it still is, but they have embedded inside of the Australian Federal Police the most corrupt elements of the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation. And we are all now seeing how rotten the FBI is and what they have been doing to President Trump and other, activists such as the J6 protesters and others. And the Federal Bureau of Investigations are embedded inside of our law enforcement agencies. Okay, and so the old saying, if you send your son away to get schooled by Karl Marx, don't be surprised or angry if he comes back acting like a communist, right? Well, we have rotten elements, the most rotten elements of the Federal Bureau of Investigations embedded inside of our Australian Federal Police. And bear in mind, Rick, and I've spoken about this before on the Green Room, this is the same fucking Federal Police that sat back and endorsed the open murder of the Assistant Police Commissioner, Colin Winchester, who got 2 9mm bullets in the back of his head in his car when I was the president of the Trades Hall Council. And Colin Winchester was a good man. He was a good man. And just like Port Arthur, they set up a loner. This time it was Harold Charles Eastman. And I knew Harold Charles Eastman. He was a public servant. He was a nutcase, but he was a public servant. He worked inside of the bureaucracy. They set him up and charged him and had him convicted for the murder of Colin Winchester and locked him away for 20 years. 20 fucking years he spent in jail, only then to be found. A miscarriage of justice. He was innocent. They released him. They gave him $1 million plus and non-disclosure agreement and said, don't you ever talk about this to anyone. Anyone. Okay? So still 30 years after the murder of Australia's most senior police officer, a decent man, a man that I held in high regard. 30 years later, this lousy, corrupt Australian Federal Police still can't put their finger on his murderer. So These are the people that are supposed to be keeping law and order in this country. Don't get me started about these fucking Victorian cops either. You're seeing people in witness protection programs being murdered and no one ever held accountable. You go into a witness protection program in Victoria, you're lucky to come out alive. That's how rotten and corrupt they are, okay? So here you have Queensland, where more people in the last 18 months have been shot and killed in Queensland by cops up in Queensland than all other police forces in this country combined. That's how much they're murdering us up here in Queensland. And some of these killings have been outright dodgy as all hell. You go down into New South Wales, mate, rotten to the core. Goes back to the 1960s when Abe Saffron, the King's Cross criminal, had them all on tape committing crimes, and he blackmailed a lot of them. They were all being blackmailed. Abe Saffron for decades was untouchable. No cop, no judge, no court would touch him at all. Now that's who we have right now that are going to investigate the Victorian branch of the CFMEU. Hey? What do you think's going to go on there? Okay? They are going to enforce the law. These utterly corrupt, rotten institutions are going to somehow enforce and conduct a proper investigation into John Setka and the CFMEU, and somehow they're going to clean it up. I don't think so. I've been saying this ad infinitum, ladies and gentlemen, the military. It's the only way. You're not going to clean this shit up without them, okay? These cops are rotten. They're rotten. I'm not saying every single cop in there. I'm saying the entire institution is rotten, okay? So that's where we are now at. We now have a union which has a building program of 12 billion, I think the number is. They've got a huge $12 billion in building program in Victoria that's been announced. And my advice, the advice given to me, that it's about at least a 10% cost to the unions. The unions are going to cost about 10%. So you're talking $1.2 billion in add-on costs to these publicly funded projects that is going to be siphoned off and all go to corrupt union figures, bikers and biker gangs, and to organised criminals like Mick Gatto and a number of his organised violent criminal mates. Okay? So this is a huge problem, ladies and gentlemen. It's huge. It's got heaps of money, and it has attracted the most dangerous and the most, corrupt people, right, from organised crime through to political, corporate and trade unions and now organised bike criminals, okay? It's a huge problem, okay? That's why it is important. That's why this whole thing with John Setka and the CFMEU is a big deal. It is a big deal. Now, I've said this, ladies and gentlemen, I've said it to you, Rick. Look, we have a belligerent occupation. This belligerent occupation has several or many moving parts. They are the parliaments. They are the courts, the cops, the councils. These things are the moving parts that make up this belligerent occupation. Then you've got us. We are the oppressed. We pay for all this shit. We are the enslaved. So you've got the belligerent occupation, and then you've got us. Now, out at one side, you have people who are making lots of money off and out of this belligerent occupation, right? Lots of it. And they support the belligerent occupation. They are not formally part of the belligerent occupation, but they profit from the belligerent occupation, and therefore they defend this belligerent occupation. And the Australian trade union movement, and specifically the CFMEU, fully support and will defend this belligerent occupation, because this belligerent occupation is rewarding them with hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay? That's what we are now up to, ladies and gentlemen. Man, are we in a mess? Are we in a mess? Let's talk about some of the others. In New South Wales, I've said Darren Greenwood, the state secretary, his son up there were caught in buying and selling cocaine out of union cars, taking corrupt payments when they were doing enterprise agreements and so on, worth thousands of dollars, okay? Again, rotten to the bloody core. Let's talk about the CFMEU in Queensland, where I live, okay? Not too long ago, a former state secretary of the CFMEU, Dave Hanna, was jailed for corrupt conduct, and he also got jailed for 6 years for being convicted of a rape of a woman as well, okay? Heaps of corruption up here in Queensland. I go back to 1990, Rick, and or 89. I'll talk about the corruption that existed in the CFMEU in 89 that I was part of, right, as a national force to come up to Queensland and to clean these bastards right out. Okay, so I've already been through this in hand-to-hand combat and right on the front lines. Let's talk about another union. Let's talk about the Health Services Union of Australia, who cover all of the hospital orderlies, not the nurses, but all the health workers themselves. Go back a few years and look at Kathy Jackson and that other bloody Williamson, these people, right, who robbed the union of millions of dollars and went on a huge spending spree of cocaine and hookers and alcohol and holidays and big gifts and overseas travel, okay? They all got caught out and they all went to purgatory, right, but convicted. This is not an allegation. These are convictions, okay? Let's also talk about, these police unions, right? Let's talk about the Queensland Police Union with Ian Levers, who's a thug, right? And nothing but a big Norm Gallagher standover thug. After that shootout at Wimarilla up north, up here, he came out publicly and openly threatened members of the parliament, members of the public, right? If they spoke about and opened their mouths about that incident, then they were going to come down like a ton of bricks. He's a fucking thug, mate. He's a fucking thug with a police uniform, a badge and a gun. Mate, conducts himself no different than Norm Gallagher of the Builders Labourers Federation back in the 1970s and the 1980s. And I knew Norm well as well, okay? Norm had a lot more honour and a lot more integrity than Ian Levers, though, okay? So these are your Queensland police unions, New South Wales police unions, your Victorian police unions, all fucking rotten, all of them. Okay? And you're going to say to me, or anyone says to me, oh, yeah, we're going to clean John Sicker up and clean these unions up. Bullshit. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. The CFMEU, mate, are joined at the hip with the government. They're joined at the hip with the Australian Labor Party. Okay? They are the biggest money laundering operation that launder hundreds of millions of dollars in election funding and other funding for the Australian Labor Party, which is why a lot of union officials end up taking Senate positions and federal members of parliament positions because they have bought them out. The Australian trade union movement own the Australian Labor Party. They fund it. They have all the black budget monies and they own it. There is no different to the Australian Labor Party and the Australian trade unions. So those gangsters, those organised crime criminals are not just inside of the unions. They're inside of the Australian Labor Party who govern all of us. Okay? So this is a real problem, ladies and gentlemen. a real problem. Now, I've said this before, Rick. Okay, the way to bring this belligerent occupation down is to attack and lay siege to those support structures that are holding it up. You have support structures that are holding this belligerent occupation in place. And those moving pieces are the courts, the cops, right, the parliaments, and the unions. And the unions are profiting out of this belligerent occupation, and they are doing everything they can to keep this belligerent occupation securely in place. So I say we have to lay siege to those support structures, okay? And we've got to literally take them out. We've got to take them out. And we now have an opportunity with all of this corruption that's come out. Now, I want to also say this, Rick. Every single alt media channel, every one of them, should be tuned and focused in on John Setka, the corruption, the CFMEU, and the ALP, and all of it, to bring this down, okay? That's what should be happening. But you know what you got? You got nothing. You got fucking nothing. You haven't got one word being said, not one, by any of these alt media pissants, mate. These Freemason operatives, these fakers and bullshit artists, right? Not one fucking word. They won't come to me. They won't come to me, the former president of Trade for All, the former secretary of the CFMEU, who knows this stuff back to front, who knows it back to front. Not on hearsay, but first-hand testimony. They won't touch me, Rick. They won't touch Como John, mate. I'm fucking radioactive, mate. I'm radioactive. They won't come anywhere near me, baby. These gutless, weak, alt media freedom fakers, mate. That's who they are, right? I'm taking a big risk, mate, taking on people like John Setka and Mick Gatto and all these other fucking gangsters. But someone's got to have the balls to call this shit out and to stand up, and it might as well be me. And you'll also note, Rick, is this. In 11 years, I've been fighting on the front line as a public person who's come out after all of these unions, all of the Labor Party, non-stop. There has never been one allegation made about me. There's never been one attack made about me, that I have somehow received corrupt payments, that I somehow, have been living a double life, that I've been having affairs with women, I've been out rooting children, I've been out stealing or anything else. Nothing has ever come about me. Why, Rick? Why? Because they've got nothing. They've got nothing. Let me tell you this, Rick, the old school communists, mate, we despised the Australian Labor Party. We hated them. We always knew that they were a mob of gutless, weak pissants who would destroy workers' benefits, and ultimately they were rotten and corrupt. We always knew it, and we had nothing to do with them. Let's talk about the Queensland federal intervention in 1989, when Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne, South Australia and Tassie, when my union state executives from them all come together and formed a convoy and drove to Queensland in like 100 cars. And we drove up from the southern states. We came up here to Queensland, to Brisbane. We went to the union head office and flogged them and threw them out the office, belted the piss out of them and threw them all out the office and told them to fuck off and don't come back. We then went through and forensikally evaluated all the payments, everything that was done, and found massive corruption. We then handed it over to the Queensland Police and demanded that they charge and they take them to court. Now, you've got to understand at the same time that the communist leadership of the CFMEU were demanding that these ALP operatives in Queensland, in the CFMEU, be charged and go to jail, that the two key players, which was Wayne Goss, the Premier, and his Chief of Staff, which was the ex-Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, were begging me and my national executive don't do it. No. They wanted us to back off and allow the corruption to continue because the Queensland branch was laundering hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on behalf of the ALP. Now that is Kevin Rudd, our fucking ambassador in America, that useless bloody idiot, and former Queensland Premier Wayne Goss. Okay, so that's the Labor Party. Now, because we were communist run and communist controlled, we had no allegiances to the Labor Party. We told them to stick it up their ass, and we went up there with full force, and we cleaned them all out. Okay? Now, let's have a look at Melbourne with all the rotten, corrupt shit going down there now. Let's have a look. Let me refer to some of my notes here. Okay. Now, what have we heard so far, Rick? We've heard from, we've heard from Sally McManus, the secretary of the ACTU. Okay, the man boy or the girl boy, whatever she is. I personally think she's a fucking tranny, mate. Okay. Now, Sally McManus, I've known since she was 18 when she worked for the Australian Services Union, and I was the senior industrial legal officer for the Federated Clerks Union. I know all these people, mate. I know them personally, and I've known them for decades, right? Sally McManus knows and says, oh, look, we don't know anything about this corruption. It's the first we've heard about it, if there's any truth to it, then we're going to give it to the police. The same fucking police that I've just explained to you how rotten they all are, right? So she's saying, any criminal stuff, we're going to give it to the police. Well, we all know how far that's going to fucking go. Nowhere, okay? And then you start having a look and saying, well, what does Michael Ravbar, the Queensland secretary of the CFMEU, what does he say about all this? He says he laughs. He laughs at Anthony Albanese. He said that Albo has soiled his nappy, right, on unproven allegations. They are just scorning him, treating him like a joke. You've got to also understand that the current Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, he also used to work for me and my union, the CFMEU, back in the mid-1980s in the New South Wales branch. So I know these pissants, mate. Anthony Albanese was a pissant back then, and he's a fucking bigger pissant right now, okay? You go on, you have a look. What is the CFMEU manufacturing division? Their divisional secretary, his name is Leo, and I can't pronounce his last name, as something like Scullidan or something like that. But he openly comes out and says the CFMEU construction of John Second was rotten to the core. He's coming out saying put him in jail. That's what he's saying. And why is he saying that? Because he's been threatened. He's been threatened by John Setka. John Setka come around to his house in the dark, left a suitcase there with his name and called him a dog and was wording basically to threaten his life. Okay? And now all these clowns out there saying, oh, CFMEU bullying, stop it, take your bullshit and fuck off, idiots. This is not CFMEU bullying. It's not bullying. These are threats to kill. These are criminal threats to kill, maim, or injure. So get this bullying shit out of your heads, okay? You go on and have a look, what is John Sutton, the former National Secretary of the CFMEU? John Sutton, I know John well. John's now retired. He's openly come out and said it's out in the open. It's rotten. It's bad. And it's got to be fixed. That's what John Sutton said, and I've got a bit of respect for John. John, despite being a bit of a useless dickhead in terms of his organising ability, he was basically an honest man, okay? He was basically an honest man, right? And so John's come out, and John's put the finger on him in a recent interview, okay? But keep going. Have a look at the Mining and Energy Division, the CFMEU, the ME, the Mining and Energy Division, which is headed up by a guy that I've known since he was 18, a guy called Tony Ma. Tony is a communist. He was a made man prior to me, and Jack Campbell, the Federal Secretary of the CFMEU, was his sponsor and the guy that trained him. Okay, but Tony Marr and Michael O'Connor, the National Executive of the MEU, had de-amalgamated from the CFMEU. They've got away. They've got out of it. They've demarried them. They've divorced them. Right, so the ME, the Mining and Energy Union, is no longer there. Now it's the Maritime. The M stands for Maritime. But the Mining and Energy Union is now called the MEU, the Mining and Energy Union. Right? Okay, they got out. Why? Why did Tony get out of that amalgamation? I'll tell you why. Because it was too rotten. Tony Marr, a communist. A lot of things I could say I don't like and don't agree with Tony. But Tony is an honest man. He's not a crook. He's not a criminal crook. You mightn't like him. You mightn't agree with his politics, but he doesn't steal and he doesn't stand over and he doesn't threaten. He doesn't do any of this shit, mate. He's a tough little nugget, Tony, but he's not a criminal, okay? You keep going. So they bailed out. Okay, so you got the general division, the general manufacturing division of the CFMEU saying they're rotten. You've got Tony Marr and the biggest division, the mining division, de-amalgamating because they're getting out of it, right? Okay, it's rotten. It's rotten. And this union and their colleagues, it's not just them. They are part of a faction, and I want to talk a little bit more about factions later on, Rick. But they run the Labor Party. They run it. They're joined at the hip. And so we now have organised crime, right? In underworld figures who are now dictating union policy and government policy. You understand me? You got to understand this, Rick. Look. There's a thing called liquidated damages. People think, look, okay, the union, right? You want an enterprise agreement, you pay $5,000. They think that's corruption. That's chicken shit. It's chicken shit, right? You've got to understand the contractual system that works in construction. If you have a subcontractor, right, that cannot fulfill his contract, right, on time, if he can't finish it, right, and that causes a loss for other subcontractors and for the principal contractor, then they sue you for what they call liquidated damages. And it's a poison pill. It'll bankrupt you. Right? If you have a painting contractor and he's coming on and he doesn't get that job fast enough and they have other trades that have got to come in afterwards and they can't come in because his contractor hasn't done his work, then those other subbies go back to the principal contractor and say, you owe us. We can't come. We had a contract to start on this day to do this work. We were ready and you weren't. So the principal contractor goes back down to the painting contractor and he says, hey, I'm going to take all these costs out of your contract, and also if you don't have enough money in that contract, I'm going to sue you for the rest. Okay, it's called liquidated damages, right? And a union can fuck up a subcontractor like that. It is so easy to slow one down. Right? Slow one down. So you'll have a steel fixing contractor and the union will say, your contract's worth $10 million. Yes, it is, righto. Well, you're going to cough up and you're going to play the game with us, etc. If not, our cranes are going to slow your job down so bad, we're not going to lift your steel, we're just going to slow you down, we're going to have crane breakdowns, safety problems, whatever. And eventually, that steel fixer, his contract, he can't fulfill it. And then you have liquidated damages and he pays a fortune. So it's not just the cash that's handed over, right, it's the contractual system that they work in, and it's worth hundreds of millions. Now, if you take that same scenario and move it from the subcontractors up into the principal contractors, right, the big contract. If you have a $500 million construction job, right, $500 million, right, then the union goes to the minister, the Labor minister, and says, I want this contractor to get that contract, right? And they will go back to that contractor and say, you're going to pay, we are going to deliver to you a $500 million contract. And for you to get that, you're going to give us several millions of dollars, right? Whatever the price is. You are talking huge money, huge money. Organised crime does not come in for peanuts, mate, for peanuts. They come in for big payola. And right now, in billions and billions of dollars worth of publicly funded projects that we're paying, they are getting overinflated prices, huge additional costs to build it, and those additional on costs are being siphoned all off and being distributed to corrupt unions, corrupt gangsters, corrupt bikies, and other fucking pissheads who don't deserve any of our fucking money at all, okay? So that's what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. This is a huge problem. It's a huge problem. And because of the money and that's involved, do you honestly think these unions here in Australia are going to lift one finger to get rid of this belligerent occupation? No way. No way. They're making a fortune out of it. They're making a fortune. They're all going to go and live when the country and the economy crashes. They're all going to go and live in China. China's got a social credit score, and they're all going to go over there with gold cards. Gold cards. It's only us idiots that are going to get the shit, the shit cards. They're all going to get the gold and platinum cards, mate, and they're going to live a high life. Okay? That's what's going. They don't care about. They hate this country. They hate us, and they hate this country, and they won't think twice about destroying its economy, destroying its natural wonders and beauty and bounty, and also fucking destroying all of us, mate. They don't care. They don't fucking care. Let me move on, Rick. Let me move on. You got any comments so far, brother?
Yeah, it's this is an explosive, as we knew it would be, an explosive episode of the Green Room. I've got a bunch of questions which I'll raise with you later because I've got some. I'd like your take on it. But the one I'd like to mention right now, and everybody watch.
You just dropped out there, Rick. You got the hands on the wheel, Sarah?
Yeah, you might just have to. I know
I'll
he's back.
going.
He's back.
Okay, Rick. Okay, take another chill pill, brother, and I'll keep ploughing on. Look, Rick, the Freemasons are not the only society that's involved in this shit, Rick. You got to understand, they are not the only secret society that are tearing this country apart. The Freemasons are a big part of it, right? A big part. The Freemasons control the cops and the courts and the judges and other institutions. They do. They do. But in the parliaments, it's the political Zionists that also controls a lot of the parliamentary comings and goings. And they are a very dangerous, another secret society. But that's not all. You've got the Fabian Society, who control the trade unions and the Labor Party, and other secret little factions like Emily's List and other factions as well. So these secret societies that swear oaths against the constitution of this country and against the Australian people, right, control all of these institutions, and they are bringing this country and to hell, right? Okay. Now, the guy behind all of the Fabian Society and the trade unions and that is George Soros, the Open Societies Foundation. George Soros, when he wanted to make a big move in Australia, he wrote half the check for the activist group Get Up, right? Get Up. He funded half of it, Open Societies, and Bill Shorten, the National Secretary of the Australian Workers' Union down in Melbourne, but he was the National Secretary of the Australian Workers' Union, right? He funded the other half out of union members' money, and they set Get Up up in Australia, was supposed to be some, rank and file type, organic type organisation. It's a controlled opposition fraud. Okay, all right. So these, it's not just a one secret society here, Rick. There's a few of them involved here. Okay, the one exception is the Queensland branch of the Australian Workers' Union, the old Shearers' Union. It's the biggest branch of the AWU up here by far. Up here in Queensland, it's the most wealthiest branch. They're all controlled by Freemasons. The AWU here in Queensland are totally, and have been for decades, right? Maybe even up to 100 years, have been controlled by the Freemasons. So you have these secret societies, ladies and gentlemen, mate. They have infiltrated nearly every institution here in this country, nearly every rank and file organisation like our trade unions and others. They've been fully funded by very wealthy people like George Soros, right, and the Open Societies Foundation. They have white-anted our sovereignty. They have white-anted our constitution. They have infiltrated all of our institutions and our parliaments and governments, etc., and they are now steering us over a cliff. Now, we have an opportunity. Because SETCA and the CFMEU have cracked open. We, all of us, have to wedge this right open and apply a blowtorch. And again, I repeat, ladies and gentlemen, I repeat this. Not one of the old media, none of the freedom fighters, none of them will come and talk to me to interview. None of them will publish anything about the CFMEU. None of them. There's only one person that I've seen, and it's a guy called Topher Field, a Victorian. I don't know Topher, but he is an activist. He recently come out and did a podcast and interviewed a lovely young woman with lots of construction experience, and he tipped a big bucket of revelations on the CFMEU and their corrupt stuff. Okay, so Topher Field is the only one that I'm aware of in weeks, right? But you won't get any of the other fraudsters, mate. They're fucking fraudsters, mate. They have a golden opportunity, mate, a golden opportunity, and they've got to guide me, with all the inside intel, who knows this shit back to front, mate, who's willing to go right after them, right, and not one of them will contact me and even discuss it, right? Now, the only one that has been Neil Mitchell from 3AW. Neil Mitchell rang me up a few days ago and said, hey, Comrade John, you know all this shit, mate. I know your background. I said, yes, I do. He said, what's your feelings on it? And I said, mate, they've all got to go to jail, Neil. All of them. They've got to go to jail. This is just too much. And Neil said, okay, thanks for your comment. I'll be back in touch, and I'll talk to you again in the near future. Sorry, Rick, I just dropped my glasses. So Neil Mitchell can find my number. Neil Mitchell knows who I am. Neil Mitchell knows the information that I'm aware of, right? But you can't get any of these others, mate. None of them. I've said this repeatedly on the Green Room, on every other interview I've done. We have rebuilt the same garbage in the old media that we've just fought for 5 years to get rid of. We've just rebuilt the same garbage, right? Okay, the same censorship, the same crap, the same choke points, the same, factional warlords. We've just rebuilt the fucking lot of it, mate. And I'm proof of it. I'm proof. You tell me I'm wrong, Rick. You tell me that the one person in this country that knows these grubs inside out is me, and none of these grubs want to talk to me. Okay, look, let's just keep pushing on, right? Look, this CFMEU shit is dynamite. It's all connected in. I mean, look, you wondered why with all the corona. Remember all the nurses out there dancing and doing all the shit and telling us the hospitals were full and people were dying and they were out dancing? Well, you want to know why they were doing all of that? Well, that's because George Soros owns the Health Services Union of Australia. He owns them. He bought them all off. They're all rotten and corrupt. Those that are not in jail, right? You get me? So, this has got big implications because had there been a real union there who knew shit was going on, it was corrupt, they would have stepped up and said something. But no, when you've got a George Soros-owned union, right, they're going to play the game. They're going to play the game, right? So the health services, mate, that's why they ran riot in all these public hospitals and murdered heaps of people with Zetamir and all this other shit that they got up to, right? Okay. We move on, mate. We move on. Look, I want to talk about factions, right? I want to talk about factions. I've just said, Rick, that we have rebuilt exactly the same choke points, exactly the same, censorship and everything else. We've rebuilt it all, right, inside the alt media and inside the freedom movement. We've rebuilt a lot of it, right? Okay, so we've gone nowhere. We've spent 5 years fighting our way out of one corporate media, mainstream media shit thing, and we've walked straight back into another, and we've built it ourselves, okay? But I want to talk about factions because this is the other thing we've rebuilt, right? Listen, I come from a world of factions, right? In all of the unions, in all of the Communist, Labor Party, all of them, right? They are run and managed using a factional system, right? The factional system, okay? The factional system are, groups of self-interested people who only care about themselves, right? But they are part of a bigger organisation, but they're only working for themselves and not for the health and the benefit of the bigger organisation, okay? And this factional system goes back to Rome. It goes back to Rome, okay? I've come out of a factional system with the unions and the Labor Party and the Communists and all that, and I've come into the freedom movement, the alt media, and it's run exactly the same. Exactly the same. It's the same factional system, okay? And it goes back to Rome. Okay, back in Rome, right? I just watched, as a bit of research, a Netflix series, and it's called Those Who Are About to Die. Okay, if you get an opportunity, I know someone who steals all this stuff and pirates all this. I don't pay for it, right? But I watched it, and you've got to see it. It's like an expose on the Roman faction system, and they openly say, we're part of the white faction or the green faction or this faction. They openly say it in this Netflix series, and all the skullduggery and stabbing the emperor in the back and all this shit, mate. It's the factions. And this goes back to Rome and the Vatican and the Romans and these Jesuits and Freemasons and all of these old fucking, old hands. They brought that forward, and that's how they are managing all of the activism here in Australia, okay, through the faction system, okay. The ALP, the unions, they're a huge money laundering operations, okay? They're a huge election fixing machine with money and manpower. It's no wonder that Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum programs are all supported by the unions because they're all part of it. They're all making money of it. Just like the hospitals that were financially incentivised to murder people in hospitals. Anyone dies of COVID, i.e. if you kill them, you get a heap of money. If they live, well, you don't get it. So they were incentivised to kill you, right? Okay, so that's what we are going through, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is really, really serious stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I want to talk just briefly about this commissioner, this administrator that's gone into the Victorian branch of the CFMEU. Under what authority, right? I mean, I have never heard of any administrator ever being appointed to a trade union. It's just bullshit. I've never heard of it, mate. It's unheard of. Unheard of. When we were faced with corruption in the Queensland branch of the CFMEU, we came up with baseball bats and big heavy dudes, and we just banged them on the chin and threw them out the door. And that's how we cleaned it up. But now you got these cross-dressing fannies and faggots from the CFMEU, all these effeminate faggots and bloody homosexuals, right, who wouldn't fight their way. They couldn't pull a skin off a custard pudding, now have to go down and try and deal with Mick Gatto. Mick would laugh at him. Big Mick would laugh at him and say, piss off, you bloody pissheads. And who wouldn't? I'd fucking laugh at him. And I'm past my prime fighting age, mate. I'd laugh at these faggots myself. Okay, they can't fix it. They won't fix it, and they can't. The unions won't police it. They can't police it. They are powerless. They are powerless. The Victorian cops won't fix any of this. They're rotten to the core, and the CFMEU, John Setka, has probably got a lot of blackmail dirt on them anyway. Okay, they're not going to fix it. The Australian Federal Police aren't going to fix it. No way. Why? Because they've got rotten FBI, rotten bloody United States Justice Department, the Department of Justice embedded in their organisations. They ain't going to fix it. That's the fucking Democrats, mate. That's the Democrats running our law and order in Australia. And you only got to look overseas and what they've done to President Trump. That poor bugger. If you can hear me, President Trump, out there in this infinite universe of electronic things, man, it stands out, President Trump. They're a mob of rough dogs, and they're corrupt and rotten, and we can see what they're doing to you. We can see it. It's obvious. And it's these corrupt institutions that are embedded inside of Australia's law and order bloody institutions. This is bad stuff. Okay. Look, Rick, what can we do? I say this. We have a belligerent occupation. You have to attack. You've got to lay siege to the supports, the pillars that are holding this belligerent occupation up in place. Now, what are the pillars? They're pretty easy. It's the courts. It's the cops. It's the councils. It's the unions, right, that are holding all of this in place. Okay, now we have a great opportunity to really go after the unions as a backdoor, as a access point into this, as a direct access into this belligerent occupation, to discredit it and to bring it down. And none of the alt media, none of the freedom movement, none of them want to touch it. None, except for me, Como John. And I also tip my hat to Topher Field because he's the only one. It's the only one, mate. Look, this is unbelievable, Rick. It's the biggest opportunity we've had, mate, to unseat these bastards and to expose them. And these lazy, gutless, weak infiltrators inside this freedom movement won't touch it. They won't touch it. Well, I've got news for them. I am. And I'm going to go right after him. Now, that leads me into my next part of this discussion, Rick, and I want to say where we're going to go with all of this. Look, it's no secret that on the 9th of February, I've done a green room interview and with yourself and announced that I was going to seek imprimatur to conduct a national strike. And I went ahead and done that, right? Now, we had tens and tens of thousands of votes in favour of a national strike before it was pulled down. I then had to very quickly recover, and it wrong-footed me. I didn't think that was going to happen, right? I didn't realise that Israel's Unit 8200 was involved in this particular website. I didn't know. I mean, I wish I did, but I didn't know. Anyway, so I had to recover. I then went and at great cost to myself. I mean, this has not been cheap, mate. Nearly 25 grand, right? Okay, to set a new website, new vote with data management capabilities, etc., etc. And thus far, it's been going very well. The strike actions that we've embarked on have been broadly accepted by lots and lots of people, and it's growing. It's growing. Okay. Now we had many tens of thousands of votes in favour of the strike, but on this occasion, because of the attack, previous people seem to be a bit more nervous, right? Okay, and so far we've got about 10,000 new voters, right, that have come in and voted for the strike. But that's not where the action is happening, Rick. Behind the scenes, I've paid a lot of money for this software, this Zoho package software. Great stuff, right? Great stuff. We can calculate, we can monitor how many people come to our website and how long they spend and what they look at. We can't tell them who they are, and we don't want to know who they are. We just want to know statistics. We don't want to know individuals. That's not of no interest to us, right? Now, behind the scenes, in the last 30 days, maybe 40 days, we've got 149,000 visitors to our site. Okay, 149,000 in just over 4 weeks. Okay, and they've spent between 8 and 18 minutes on average looking at our videos, our uploaded videos, and our documentation. Okay. So this strike, it's lit a fuse, Rick. It has lit a fuse, okay? Yes, it's a bit of a slow burn for now, but it's got enormous interest. And the reason why it hasn't gone a lot bigger than what it already has, again, because of the censorship, because of all of the lockout, not one, ladies and gentlemen, not one of these old media pissants or their mates will ever discuss the national strike. Not one of them. Rick Bosi has been the only one, and Rick Bosi Resources and a great lady called Laura have been the only ones that have wanted to touch this, mate. So please note that, ladies and gentlemen. Note it. Note and understand who your fucking friends are, because a lot of people out there who are bloody patting you on the back and telling you how much they love you don't give a shit. They ain't your friends. You mightn't like Como John, mate, but I ain't your enemy. I'm not. Go and look at some of those others out there that you're following. They are batting for the opposition. I'm not. Okay? I'm not. So this strike would have had a hell of a lot more profile, but it's been deliberately shut down, deliberately siphoned, and despite all of that, they still can't control it. Despite all of that, they still can't control it. It's still gotten away from them. Okay. Now, what's grown out of this strike, Rick, and this is now becoming very, very interesting. Okay. Now, Rick, I've been contacted by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people since this national strike was launched. And they wanted to discuss matters with me and different ideas and so on. Now, I've been overwhelmed by a request by hundreds and hundreds of people, mate, that have got lots of influence. These aren't just lightweights, but people with lots of influence. And they've called upon me and said, listen, John, we need to make this strike really, really go well, really, to get it fired up and to really do some damage to this belligerent occupation. It needs to be supported by a newly launched national trade union. Okay, now that took me back a bit, because that's a hell of a big call, to build and to launch a trade union, a national trade union, is a big gig. It's a big gig, mate, and it takes a lot of effort. Now, I've been constantly in contact with many people, mate, who've been calling upon me. I've been talking things through with them. I've been wargaming this out with other experienced people. What do we need? How do we do it? All this sort of stuff. I'm just going to give you one example of what really dissuaded me and why I resisted it so heavily was because of the banking, right? Just like what Chris Guy and the other brothers and comrades said in Canada when they wanted to shut down the truckers' convoy, they shut their banking down. And without a bank, right, without any funds and banking, you can't run a trade union. I mean, I know it's bloody impossible. You can't do it, okay? And so because I was convinced that they were never I'm talking about the Freemasons, the Deep State, the Fabians, the central bankers, all these grubs, mate. They were never going to allow a free trade union to be launched in Australia with an operating bank account that would allow it to do its job. They were never going to allow that. And that dissuaded me. I kept saying, no, I can't see it working unless we can get some banking, right? Okay. Now, since then, dealing and talking with other very key players and people out there, I think I've overcome the banking issue. I think I've now been able to secure a safe operating bank account for the launch of a new trade union. Okay, so I've overcome that problem. Now, there's still a hell of a lot more other stuff that needs to be done, right? Okay, but the key issue, which is the banking side of it, right, it looks like now I've been able to overcome that obstacle. Now, because of that big sticking point, I have now, and I'm now going to give this commitment to your audience, Rick, I have now given a commitment to these people that I am now going to launch a new national Australian trade union here in Australia. It's going to go ahead. It's going to go ahead. Its name will be the Freedom Union, okay? The Freedom Union, and its mantra is this: the Freedom Union, making Australia great again. It's going to be a MAGA, and that's going to piss all these lefties right off. All these Trump haters, all of them. It's going to drive them fucking insane. I'm going to be drinking lefties' tears, mate, by the cupful. Okay, you watch them. You watch them. This is going to go ahead, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, but, and there's a huge but. Okay, it's going to go ahead, right? But I can't build this. I can't build it in its totality and then offer that to you to join. It can't be done that way. If this union is going to be built, I have to invite you to join me to build it. Okay, to build it. I'll tell you how to build it. I'll educate you. I'll do all of that stuff. I know whatever has to be done, but I can't do it without a membership base that's going to help build the union, because I can't build it and then in its entirety and then offer it to you and say, here it all is. It's all a finished product. Join here, come here, and this is all this. I can't do it. I can't do it. I do not have the funds. I don't have the funds, and I don't have the manpower to be able to do it that way. What I'm putting out there is this, Rick. I'm saying that Commo John has now made a commitment that I'm going to launch a new Australian trade union. I'm going to make a commitment to all of you that we've got our banking account overcome, right? Overcome. We've conquered that one, okay? That's the second thing. I've given a commitment to everyone out there, right, that this union has to be built from the ground up with you, as you people out there working with me to build this union as it should be built. This, and let's make it a true rank and file organic trade union, not a top-down union, but an organic union coming up. Okay. Now I'm going to need probably 4-6 weeks to be able to crystallise all of this stuff. I don't know, maybe longer, but I'm going to need 4 to 6 weeks to set all this up and to crystallise it, and to then be able to launch this new trade union, the Freedom Union, making Australia great again. Okay, I'm going to need that amount of time, but I'm going to need everyone to pitch in and help. Now, financially, again, so that you know, it's going to cost $200 per annum in subscription fees. That's how much it's going to cost, okay? Now, that subscription fee may go down next year when we're on our feet and all that, but for now, to get everything mobilised in order, I need about $200 per annum in membership fees, okay? And when you join in the short term, your expectation should be nothing. I can't offer you anything. You're going to join a union without me being able to offer you anything, or little. I can't offer you much, right? You get me? I'm offering you a stake, a seat at the table to help me and a whole bunch of other people to build this union so that it can offer great benefits and great protections, okay? And it's coming from the rank and file, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, the announcement tonight is that a new national trade union is going to be launched called the Freedom Union, making Australia great again. Its benefits that it's going to be able to offer you is sweet fuck all. How's that? How's that? Just like some of these other pisshead freedom fighters who asked you for money and they give you nothing, right? They give you nothing. Okay, well, I'm going to offer you, I can't offer you protections. I can't offer you this stuff up front. I can't. I'm offering you a very big opportunity to build this union from the ground up and get all of these protections in place ASAP and to be part of the inner team to do it. And for you to do that, I need $200 off you. And I need about 1,000 new members within the first 30 days. From 30 days of our webpage going up, our new Freedom Union webpage is being built now. I need 1,000 new members to join at $200. That gives me the foundation monies to build the entire union, everything, okay? And I need you people out there to give me your energy, volunteer to help me work. I need administrators. I need people to help with social media channels. I need many jobs that need to be done. Please. Now, this trade union, and this is part of the dilemma that I'm in, and we've got to work our way through all this, right? Look, the new National Freedom Union, the Freedom Union of Australia, okay, it can either be based and predicated upon the Constitution of 1901, okay? So it's got that as its foundation, okay, and it's built out of the Constitution of 1901. But there is also another way of doing it, and that's using existing international law, okay, international law that's already out there, and use that as the basis to build the union, right? Now, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just simply saying these are threshold issues that need to be worked through with this committee, this team that's going to help build this, okay? So there's not only just needing some finances and needing some infrastructure, webpage and administrate, all that, but there's also some very key threshold, fundamental legal issues that need to be worked through as to what direction we take. Do we base it off here, or do we go over here, use international law and register it and base it there, etc., etc. Okay. So these are questions that are out there. I'm asking everyone, please come in, help me by joining the union, pay $200 and come and put your energy, your effort, your support into the team and help us build it. Okay. Rick, I'm going to pull up and give you another couple of minutes, please, and while I have a glass of wine.
Thanks, John. You never fail to impress. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been privileged tonight, I mean this with great sincerity, to see a massive sledgehammer against the damn war, which is the corruption in this country, and John's the man to swing that sledgehammer. And he's put a big crack down the centre of that concrete edifice now. Bloody brilliant, mate. Just a couple of things to really not just bring it home, because John's brought it home, but the message that this has been going on in the same players are doing it is, and he mentioned, for example, Wayne Goff and Kevin Rudd, who was his chief of staff when he was Premier of Queensland. Now, Kevin Rudd was also implicated, and allegations were made that he covered up, shredded cabinet documents in relation to the rape of a young woman at a child detention facility. Massive cover-up, alleged. Maybe Kevin Rudd's just a lovely, misunderstood bloke. Maybe, don't know. You make up your own minds. But as a chief of staff to shred cabinet documents, I think that might be something that requires a custodial sentence if found guilty. Don't know. But the governor at the time that facilitated all this stuff was a woman called Quentin Bryce. Now, what did Quentin Bryce end up? Well, Governor-General of Australia. Can you see how this incestuous, filthy little organisation runs? These are the same people doing the same shit year after year after year after year. So when John says he knows these people, he knows these people. They're the same players. Now, what does it mean to you and me out in the suburbs or in the country town or wherever we happen to be living? Do you think the war on drugs was lost because it can't be won? No. Because there's a direct line to the premier of every state. There's a direct line to every police commissioner in every state. There's a direct line. That's why it can't be won. Now, I'm not talking whether you're a libertarian and you want to smoke that. That's not the question here. These people with drugs, and this is the unions, and you can confirm this, John, drugs, guns, prostitution, child sex trafficking. The unions are up to their necks in it. How do you think this system works? They need distribution. They need protection. What do you think the unions do? So this is the real impact of what we're talking about here. So when John says this is a seminal moment in Australian history, you've watched history tonight, folks. This video of John laying it all out fearlessly, like a good man does, is a seminal moment in Australian political history. This is it. Another issue, industry super funds, John. What are the industry super funds worth, and what are the unions doing with that sort of money? What sort of money are we talking about with these industry super funds?
Look, Rick, the industry super funds were set up by 6 communists, and I was one of them. Right? 6 communists set up the industry super funds and then proliferated these super funds. It started off in construction. That's where it first started off. It started off with 2 funds. One was called the CTRF, the Combined Trade Union Retirement Fund, and the other one was called C plus Bus. It used to just be BUS, the Building Union Superannuation Scheme, and then they got construction, so it was C plus Bus, and then CTRF amalgamated into C plus Bus and formed an industry super fund, and that became the model. That became the template to be used throughout all of Australia. Now, C plus Bus right now, today, I think is worth $98 billion. Billion. That's one. $98 billion. And then when you go and look at Australian Super, the Retail Employees Retirement Trust, the Maritime Super Fund, and all the rest of them, when you combine it all together, it's about $500 billion, $500 billion funds under management, which automatically grows at 10% per year under legislation with the Superannuation Guarantee Act. Okay? It is a milking cow of massive proportions. And you've got organised criminals who are sitting at that table. Organised criminals. Okay? So you've got criminals in 3-piece suits and hats, and you've got other criminals, right, who are rocking up there on Harley Davidsons, okay? But they have a massive impact and say here in the economy of Australia. They are massive, $500 billion. Our entire GDP, gross domestic product in Australia, every year is $1 trillion. They have half of that funds under management at their fingertips. I mean, this is big money. Then when you go and look at the amount of contracts that are issued in the building and construction, and I just mentioned Victoria, $12 billion. I mean, you're talking, I don't know, $150 billion. Then if they add a 10% impost on top of that, a cost of construction that they cream off, you're talking billions of dollars, billions, not going into super where they sit on top of it all and run it going into their pockets. And they use techniques like liquidated damages. They use techniques like, the government's going to award contracts. There's 3 contractors that are in it. The unions will pick the one they want to win it. They'll go and say, you're going to win it, but you're going to give us a cut of your profits. And it's huge. And that contractor said, no problem, we've already priced it in. We've already priced it in the tender. Your cut is already in the tender price. They all do it. And you know who helps them out? The Master Builders Association, the MBA. They're all part of it. People join the NBA because they're frightened of the CFMEU. So the NBA loves the CFMEU being really aggressive because it gives their members, all these subcontractors, come and join the master builders because they're scared of the union. So they're all part of it, mate. They're all part of it. And then the government minister who is in charge of public works or treasury or whoever's issuing, they're all part of it, mate. It's all part of it. It's money laundering of hundreds, if not billions of dollars. Billions. And going into criminals' hands.
And those same...
Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no, those same individuals. The other impact of having collectively $500 billion in funds under management is that they can shift the share price of major corporations because they all have to invest that money and they invest it in stocks and things like that. It's a good idea.
Absolutely.
If they threaten to remove a percentage of their massive shareholding in a company, that movement in the market will cause a drop in the price because people are thinking, hang on, what's going on here? Why is this union pulling out, I don't know, several $100 million worth of potentially out of our company? And that's shocking. As you know, the stock market can be a twitchy sort of cat at times, and a trend can start, and they can collapse a company, they can collapse a corporation, they can shift share price, they can shift the health of the Australian economy just for fun. So you got to understand, this is not just, oh, good, I've got my money in CBUS. No. They're using your money to screw you to the wall, to screw everybody. Right. So this is bigger than Ben-Hur. This is not just. The more you look at it, ladies and gentlemen, the more you'd be horrified to realise, my God, what have they been doing to us? And you know what they've been doing.
Let's get rid of these pissheads.